fantasy football fans. I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer for RealTime Fantasy Sports. Welcome to another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. On today's show, I'm going to give you 5 hot plays for Week 13 of the fantasy football season. If you have these guys on your fantasy teams, I would get them in your lineup. Or if you're looking to play some DFS this week, I would consider using all 5 of these guys in your lineup. These are 5 players I think will perform well and produce a lot of fantasy points for all of their fantasy owners. My first hot play is Bears running back David Montgomery. So Montgomery had his first 100-yard game of the season last week. It was about time, right? But the Bears passing game is a mess. It makes sense to get Montgomery more involved running the ball. They play the Lions this week. They're 28th overall against the run. I think it'll be a heavy dose of Montgomery this week. I look for him to have another 100-yard performance in Week 13. Make it 2 straight for Montgomery. I know all his fantasy owners would really enjoy that because he's had a little bit of a disappointing season. My next hot play is Dolphins receiver Devonta Parker. Parker looks a lot better with Ryan Fitzpatrick as a starting quarterback. He had his second 100-yard game of the season last week. He was targeted 14 times in that game by Fitzpatrick. He has at least 5 receptions, 6 of 11 games. Remember, he had a great finish to last year. He's more than capable of producing the big game, having a big finish for all of his fantasy owners. I look for him to keep it going again this week against the Bengals. They're 22nd overall against the pass, and they allow 26.3 points per game. Look for Parker to perform like a low-end number 1 fantasy receiver. Packers tight end Robert Tonyan is another one of my hot plays this week. He has 15-plus fantasy points 2 straight games, 5 receptions 3 of 5 games. The tight end position is not very good this year in fantasy. It's very top-heavy, but Tonyan's produced well of late. He's getting a lot of looks. He plays the Eagles this week. They're a team that allows the 14th most fantasy points at tight ends this year. I think Tonyan's another good player. I think he's a top 10 fantasy tight end in Week 13. Chiefs running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire is another player that makes my hot list this week. He had his worst game of the season last week, just 4.9 fantasy points, but I look for him to rebound this week in a big way. He plays the Broncos, and I could see the Chiefs getting up big in this game, running the ball late. The Broncos also allow the 11th most fantasy points of running backs. He had 13.3 fantasy points and a touchdown in a game against the Broncos earlier this season. I think he could eclipse both those totals in Week 13. Look for Edwards-Helaire to have a really good showing in Week 13. My last hot play is Vikings quarterback Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is red hot right now. He had a 3-touchdown game last week. He has 3 scores, 3 of his last 4 games. He has at least 21 fantasy points, 4 straight games. He has really picked up his play of late. And last week, he produced big without Adam Thielen in the lineup. Thielen returns this week, getting activated from the COVID list. They play Jacksonville, 29th against the pass, allow 29.5 points per game. Cousins could have another 3-touchdown game in this matchup, and I really think he's a top 10 quarterback in Week 13 of the fantasy season. Those are my 5 hot plays for Week 13 of the fantasy football season. Good luck in all of your games this week. I know it's a crucial week of games. A lot of teams fighting for playoff spots. Good luck in all of your matchups. I hope you come out on top. This has been Jeff Paur for RealTime Fantasy Sports. Have a great day.